Hello there, and welcome to my channel. I'm so glad you found your way here today. Tonight we turn toward what may be the strangest object in the known universe, and it happens to be the very thing you are using to listen: the mind. We carry it everywhere, lean on it for every thought, every choice, every memory, and still most of what it does unfolds quietly, just out of sight. Over the next while, we will gather 100 small truths about it. Some are settled science. Some are open questions researchers are still working through, and I will tell you honestly which is which. All of them are real, and all of them I hope will leave you looking at your own experience a little differently. And before we begin, if these calm explorations are something you enjoy, consider liking and subscribing. It helps others find their way here too. Now let's begin. Right now, something it is like to be you is happening. There is a private texture to this moment, a sense of being here that no one else can reach. We can trace the brain in fine detail. We can map which regions stir when you see the color red, feel a flash of fear, or recognize an old friend across a room. And yet no one has explained why all that electrical activity comes with any inner feeling at all. Why it does not simply run in the dark the way a calculator works, without sensing a thing. Thinkers call this the hard problem of consciousness, and after decades of careful effort, it stays genuinely unsolved. The instrument you are using to understand the world cannot yet account for the plain fact that it is awake to it. Decide right now to lift a finger. It feels obvious which came first, the choice and then the motion. That seems beyond question. It may not be. Picture a quiet laboratory electrodes resting against a volunteer's scalp, a clock face with a single moving dot the person watches in order to mark the exact instant of deciding. In experiments first run in the 1980s, the brain showed a slowly rising wave of electrical activity a fraction of a second before people reported the moment they chose to move. Later work using brain scanners went further, finding faint patterns that leaned toward one option several seconds before the person felt any decision had been made. This build-up, known as the readiness potential, begins before awareness arrives. Researchers still argue over what it means. Some say it unseats the whole idea of free will. Others say it shows only that a decision ripens beneath the surface before it ever reaches the place where we feel ourselves choosing. The disagreement is real and far from settled. What is not in doubt is the timing measured again and again. The choice may feel as though it starts with you, when in part it is already underway by the time you notice it. In the operating rooms of the mid-20th century, doctors faced patients whose seizures could not be stopped any other way. So they did something drastic. They cut the corpus callosum, the thick band of fibers that joins the brain's left and right halves, and lets them speak to one another. Afterward, the patients seemed entirely themselves. They talked, joked, walked, and remembered as before. But careful testing revealed something stranger. Each half of the brain could now perceive, decide, and act largely on its own. Show an object only to the right hemisphere, and the left hemisphere, which usually does the talking, could not say what it was, yet the left hand could still reach out and point straight to it. One patient was seen to button a shirt with one hand, while the other quietly worked to undo it. Two streams of awareness, it appeared, running in a single skull, each with its own access to the world. The findings earned a share of a future prize in medicine and reshaped how we think about wholeness itself. The unified self you feel yourself to be single and seamless may rest on a bridge you never knew was holding it together. A breath through a mask, a slow count backward, and then nothing. No dream, no sense of time passing, no darkness even. Just a voice somehow already telling you it is over. General anesthesia is among the most dependable tools in all of medicine. Each day, vast numbers of people are guided into that absence and brought safely back, often for hours of surgery they will never recall a second of. And here is the quiet strangeness. After more than a century and a half of use, scientists still cannot fully explain how these drugs dissolve consciousness. They know a great deal of the mechanism. The molecules settle onto particular receptors hush the chatter between distant brain regions, and loosen the integration that seems to hold experience together. But the precise threshold where awareness itself goes out like a lamp at the wall remains unresolved. We can find the switch and press it reliably. We cannot yet say what exactly the switch turns off. We learn to silence the mind long before we learned what the mind is. Why are you wearing what you have on today? An answer comes easily, fluent and reasonable. But consider how that answer is made. In studies of everyday choice, people are shown two faces and asked to pick the more attractive one. Then, through a sleight of hand, they are handed back the face they rejected and asked to explain their choice. Many never notice the switch. They go on to describe, in warm detail, exactly what drew them to a face they had just turned down. In other careful experiments, the true cause of a preference sat plainly in front of people while they reached straight past it for explanations that felt convincing and were simply wrong. This is not lying. The mind seems to act first and narrate afterward, like a spokesperson who steps forward to justify a decision already taken in a back room. The reasons feel like the source of the act. Often they are something we meet only after the act assembled on the spot and quietly mistaken for memory. It feels as though seeing is simple. Light arrives, the eyes catch it, the picture appears. That is the natural assumption, and it runs almost exactly backward. Think of catching a ball thrown toward you. By the time the light from that ball reaches your eye and your brain makes sense of it, the ball has already moved on. To meet it, your mind must predict where it is going, not register where it was. This turns out to describe nearly everything the brain does. A growing body of work suggests the brain is a prediction engine, constantly generating its best guess of the world, a heartbeat ahead, and comparing that guess against what the senses report. When the prediction holds, you feel nothing unusual. When it fails, that mismatch, that small surprise, is what reaches awareness and asks to be explained. The vivid, seamless present you seem to receive from outside is largely something you are producing from within, checked against reality only where it slips. You are not so much watching the world as forecasting it, and noticing chiefly where the forecast breaks. Hold out your fist at arm's length. Somewhere, off to the side of where you are looking, sits a patch of pure blindness about that size, and you have never once seen it. Here is why it exists. At the back of each eye, where the optic nerve gathers all its fibers and leaves toward the brain, there are no light receptors at all. Nothing there can register an image. It is called the blind spot, and every healthy eye has one. You can prove it with a simple trick of closing one eye and sliding a dot across your view until it silently vanishes. Yet in ordinary life, that hole never appears. The brain fills it in, weaving together the surrounding pattern, the color of the wall, the line of the table, so that the gap is seamlessly patched with an educated guess. You do not see darkness there. You see what the brain decides ought to be there. Some of the smooth, complete world you trust your eyes to deliver is quietly invented to cover a place where they deliver nothing at all. Attention feels like a window. Open it, and whatever is in front of you comes through. The truth is closer to a narrow beam that leaves most of the room in shadow. In one of the best-known experiments in all of psychology, viewers were asked to watch a short film of people passing basketballs and to count the passes made by one team. Absorbed in counting, roughly half of them failed to notice a person in a gorilla suit stroll into the middle of the scene, face the camera, thump its chest, and walk off. Half, not glancing away, looking right at it. The effect is called inattentional blindness, and it has been confirmed many times over. When attention is committed to one task, the unexpected can pass directly through the center of your gaze and never reach awareness. Have you ever searched for something on a table and missed it sitting in the open, only to feel foolish when a glance from someone else finds it? At once, you were not careless. You were simply spending your sight on something else, and the eyes, it turns out, see only what the mind has agreed to look for. We assume we hold a steady picture of the world, rich and complete from edge to edge. Watch what happens when that picture is interrupted. In a now classic study, a researcher stopped strangers on a campus to ask for directions. Mid-conversation, two people carrying a door walked between them, and in that brief screen the first researcher was swapped for a different person entirely. With different clothes, a different build, a different voice. A large share of the strangers carried on giving directions without registering that the human in front of them had been replaced. This is called change blindness, and it shows up wherever a flicker, a blink, or a cut breaks the flow of a scene. Sizable changes go undetected, even ones we would swear we could not possibly miss. What this reveals is that you do not keep a full, detailed model of your surroundings in mind at every moment. You keep the gist and trust that the rest will still be there when you next look. Most of the time it is. The completeness you feel is less a thing you possess than a confidence that the world will hold steady while you attend glance by glance to one small part of it. Look around the room. Up is up, the floor is below, everything sits where it should. That ordinary settled sense of which way the world hangs is the work of an unseen correction. The lens at the front of each eye behaves like any simple lens. It bends incoming light and casts the image onto the back of the eye, inverted top swapped for bottom, exactly upside down. That flipped picture is what your retina actually receives. Yet you never experience the world hanging upside down, because the brain reads and interprets that image, and orientation is simply part of what it works out. How deeply this is a matter of learning rather than optics was shown long ago when volunteers wore special goggles that turned their vision upside down. For days the world looked impossibly inverted. Then, remarkably, the brain adjusted and many reported the scene writing itself again while the goggles were still on. Take them off and the world flipped once more until the mind readjusted. What you call up and down is not delivered ready-made by the eye. It is a conclusion, drawn so smoothly and so constantly that you mistake it for the plain shape of the world. You are doing it right now, and you will keep doing it for as long as your eyes are open. Every few seconds, the lids sweep down and up, and for a fraction of a second, the world goes dark. A person blinks something on the order of 15 to 20 times each minute, which across a waking day adds up to many minutes spent with the lights off. By rights, life should flicker like an old film with frames missing. It does not. The view stays smooth and unbroken, as though the blinks never happened. The brain manages this by briefly dialing down the visual signal in the moments around each blink, suppressing the dimming so it never reaches awareness, and then stitching the before and after together into one continuous scene. Studies tracking eye movement found that people blink most often at natural pauses at the end of a sentence, between phrases of a conversation where little is lost. The mind hides its own interruptions so well that you live your whole life convinced of a steady, gapless picture, never noticing the small, repeated absences threaded all the way through it. Look quickly at a ticking clock and watch the second hand. Now and then, the first tick you catch seems to hang there a moment too long, stretched past a true second before the rhythm settles into pace. This is real, and it has a name. When your eyes make one of their fast jumps from one point to another called a saccade, vision is briefly suppressed, so you do not perceive the smear of motion in between. But that gap leaves a problem. The brain dislikes a hole in the record, so it backfills the missing stretch with whatever your eyes land on, extending that first clear image backward in time to paper over the blank. The result is that the moment you arrive at the clock feels longer than it should. Researchers call this effect chronostasis, the stopped clock, and they have measured it carefully. It is a small, ordinary illusion you can catch yourself in any afternoon, and it points to something larger and stranger. The time you feel passing is not a faithful clock ticking inside you. It is a story the brain assembles after the fact, edited smooth, with the seams hidden where it had to guess. We trust each sense to keep to its own work. The ears hear, the eyes see, and surely what you hear is settled by sound alone. Watch how easily that comes undone. Picture a face on a screen, the lips clearly mouthing one simple syllable, while the speaker through the audio plays a different one. What most people hear is neither. They hear a third sound, a blend the brain invents to reconcile the mismatch between what the eyes report and what the ears receive. Close your eyes, and the true sound returns at once. Open them and the illusion takes hold again, no matter how well you understand the trick. This is called the McGurk effect, and it works even on people who know exactly what is being done to them. It reveals that hearing is not a sealed channel. The brain merges sight and sound into a single judgment about what was said, and when they conflict, vision can quietly overrule the ears. What you believe you heard is not raw sound arriving clean. It is a verdict reached by senses working together and willing to bend one another to agree. The sense that your body is yours feels like the most solid fact you own. It is also surprisingly easy to bend. The setup is plain. A person rests one hand on a table hidden behind a screen, while a lifelike rubber hand sits in view where their own hand would naturally lie. An experimenter then strokes both the hidden real hand and the visible fake one at the same time, with the same gentle rhythm, using a soft brush. After a minute or two of watching, the rubber hand being touched in perfect time with the touch, they feel something shifts. People begin to sense the touch as coming from the rubber hand. Many reported starting to feel like their own. Threaten the fake hand suddenly, and they flinch as though their flesh were in danger. This is the rubber hand illusion, and it is reliable enough to study in detail. The brain builds your sense of bodily ownership by matching what it sees against what it feels. And when sight and touch agree, it will claim even a lifeless prop as part of you. The boundary of your body, which feels so absolute, is in truth being decided moment by moment, and it can be talked into moving. Imagine feeling an itch, a clench, a clear position in space, all belonging to a hand that is no longer there. For many who have lost a limb, this is daily reality, not memory and not imagination, but vivid, present sensation. It is called a phantom limb. The missing arm or leg can feel as real and as located as the one that remains, and it may persist for years. Sometimes it brings pain, a cramping or burning in fingers or toes that no longer exist, and this phantom pain can be genuinely difficult to live with. The explanation lies in the brain's inner map of the body drawn across the surface of the cortex, where every part has its own dedicated territory. When the limb is gone, its region of the map does not simply go quiet. It keeps its place, and may even be encroached upon by neighboring areas, which is why some people feel their phantom hand when their face is touched. One inventive treatment uses a mirror to show the intact limb where the missing one should be, gently persuading the brain to ease the phantom. The body you feel yourself inhabiting is not the body of flesh. It is the body the brain has mapped, and that inner image can outlast the limb it was drawn from. For most people, the number 7 is just a number, plain and colorless. For some, it is unmistakably green and always has been, and the idea that anyone sees it otherwise is the surprising part. This is synesthesia, a condition in which the senses cross. A person might perceive each letter or number bathed in its own particular color so that words appear faintly tinted. Others taste flavors when they hear certain words, or see colors rise when music plays, or feel that the months of the year occupy fixed positions in the space around them. These pairings are not chosen and not random. They are stable across a lifetime, so the same letter wears the same shade for decades, and they appear to run in families. Brain imaging suggests real crosstalk between regions that usually keep to themselves, with the area for color stirring when a synesthete merely reads a number in black ink. For those who have it, this was never strange. It is simply how the world has always presented itself, and many reach adulthood astonished to learn that everyone else lives in a quieter, more separated set of senses. It is a reminder that the seamless world each of us takes for granted may be wired differently in the person sitting beside us. Look long enough at a power outlet, and two small holes and a slot become a startled little face looking back. You did not decide to see it. It simply arrived. The mind is built from very early to find faces, and it finds them everywhere, in clouds and wood grain, in the moon, in the front of a car, in a piece of toast. This tendency is called pareidolia, and it springs from how strongly the brain is tuned to one of the most important patterns in human life. A specific patch of tissue on the underside of the brain responds with particular vigor to faces, and it leans toward false alarms on purpose. Across the long stretch of our history, missing a real face, a friend, a rival, a watching stranger, cost far more than mistaking a shadow for one. So the system is set to err towards seeing a face where there might be none. It even fires in that same telltale way when people look at the illusory faces in objects, treating the toaster's startled expression almost as it would treat a person's. We are pattern finders, aimed first and hardest at one another, so finely tuned for the human face that we keep meeting it in things that have none. Consider a simple question with an unsettling answer. Do you and a person raised across the world actually see the same colors? The rainbow looks like a fact of nature, fixed and universal. Where one color ends and the next begins may be partly a matter of language. Some languages draw a sharp line between blue and green, naming them separately, as English does. Others use a single word that covers both, and a few make finer cuts than English, splitting blue into distinct named shades, the way Russian separates lighter and darker blues entirely. In careful tests, speakers spot the boundary their language marks more quickly than one it ignores. Russian speakers, for instance, distinguish those two blues faster than English speakers, who must reach for a phrase. The light striking the eye is identical. The categories laid over it are not. Researchers are still working out how deep this runs, how much language shapes raw perception rather than merely the speed of naming. What seems clear is that the words you were handed in childhood quietly help carve up the spectrum, drawing lines across a smooth band of light that another mind raised on other words might never see at all. Here is something that should not be possible. A person who is genuinely blind in part of their visual field, who will tell you in complete honesty that they see nothing there, can still reach out and accurately grasp an object held in that blank region, or post a card through a slot, turned at an angle they claim they cannot perceive. They have no sense of seeing it. They feel they are only guessing, and yet their guesses land far better than chance, again and again. This is called blindsight, and it occurs when the eyes work, but the main visual cortex that gives rise to conscious sight is damaged. The eyes still send their signals along older, deeper pathways in the brain roots that can guide action without ever producing the feeling of seeing. So the information arrives and is used while awareness of it never lights up. It is one of the clearest demonstrations we have that seeing and the experience of seeing are two separate things capable of coming apart. The world can reach in and steer a hand through a door that consciousness was never shown. We speak of memory as though it were a tape, a faithful recording stored away and replayed when needed. That is the natural picture, and it is wrong in a way that matters. Each time you recall a moment, your brain does not retrieve a finished file. It reconstructs the scene from scattered fragments, the place, the faces, the feeling, the gist, assembling them anew into something that feels whole and original. And because it is rebuilt rather than replayed, it is open to change. Details can be quietly dropped, others added, the whole thing tinted by your present mood, by what you have learned since, by how you have told the story before. The version you recall today is shaped in part by every previous time you recalled it. This is why two people can hold honest, vivid, utterly contradictory memories of the same afternoon, each certain they are simply remembering. Your past is not a stable archive you visit. It is something you remake in the present every time you reach for it, and the very act of remembering leaves its fingerprints on what is remembered. If memory is rebuilt each time rather than replayed, a troubling possibility follows. Could a person be made to remember in full and certain detail something that never took place? They can. In a line of studies that reshaped how courts think about testimony, researchers gave adults short accounts of childhood episodes supplied by their families, and slipped in one event that had simply been invented, often a story of being lost in a shopping mall as a small child. After being asked to recall it over several sessions, a meaningful share of people came to remember the false event as real, not vaguely. They added their own details, the fear, the kind stranger who helped the feel of the moment growing more confident with each retelling. Some told afterward that it had been fabricated, struggled to let it go. Later, work planted memories more dramatic still, all through gentle, repeated suggestion. The lesson is sobering. A memory's vividness and the conviction behind it are no proof that the event ever occurred. The mind can author a past as readily as it records one, and from the inside, the invented and the real can feel exactly the same. How fragile is a clear memory of something you watched with your own eyes? Far more than feels possible, and sometimes a single word is enough to bend it. In a well-known experiment, people watched a film of a car accident and were then asked how fast the cars were going. For some, the question used the word smashed. For others, the gentler word hit. Those asked with smashed gave higher speed estimates, and a week later were more likely to report seeing broken glass in the scene, though there had been none. The wording of the question had quietly altered the memory itself, not just the answer. This is the misinformation effect, and it has been confirmed across many studies. Details suggested after the fact by a leading question. An offhand remark, another witness's account can fold themselves into a memory until they feel like part of the original experience. The witness is not lying and not careless. They are recalling a memory that has been edited without their knowledge. It is one reason confident eyewitness testimony, long treated as solid ground, has put innocent people in prison. What you saw and what you were later told can merge into one seamless certainty. There are moments so charged that we are sure they are burned in forever, recalled with perfect clarity for the rest of our lives. Where you were when you heard shattering news. The instant a life changed. These are called flashbulb memories, named for the sense that the mind captured the scene whole like a photograph taken in a flash. They feel utterly reliable, sharp in every detail, and we hold them with deep confidence. Here is the quiet surprise that careful research has found. They are not especially accurate. When people write down such a memory the day after a shocking event, then are asked again years later, their later accounts often differ in real ways. The time of day, who told them what they were doing, even how they first reacted. Yet their confidence stays sky high. The vividness does not fade in step with the accuracy. What strong emotion seems to fix is not the truth of the memory, but the feeling of certainty about it. The memories we would swear by, the ones that feel etched in stone, are subject to the same slow drift as all the rest. We simply trust them more, which can make their errors the hardest of all to see. Try to reach back to your earliest memory. Wherever it sits, it almost certainly leaves your first years a blank, a stretch of life lived in full but lost to recall. This is childhood amnesia, and nearly everyone has it. Most people can summon little or nothing from before the age of 3, and only patchy fragments from the years just after. It is not that nothing happened. Those years were dense with experience, learning, feeling the foundations of who we became. So where did the memories go? The likely answer is not simple forgetting, but that the machinery for laying down lasting autobiographical memory was still being built. The brain regions that bind an experience into a story you can revisit were immature, and language, which helps fix memories into narrative, was only arriving. There is even evidence that the rapid growth of new brain cells in early childhood, which is vital for a developing mind, may overwrite early memories as it goes. So the opening chapter of every life, the part that shaped us most, is the part we can never read. We are all in a sense strangers to the children we once were. Sit with someone in their later years and ask them to wander back through their life and watch where the vivid memories gather. They will not be spread evenly across the decades. A striking number will cluster in a single window, roughly the years from the middle teens into the early 30s. Researchers call this the reminiscence bump, and it appears again and again when people are asked to recall their most defining moments, their favorite music, the events that feel most their own. The years of youth and young adulthood hold a disproportionate share of a whole life's remembered moments. Why that stretch should shine so much brighter than the rest is still being worked out, but the leading thought is telling. Those are the years crowded with firsts, with novelty and self-definition. First love, leaving home, choosing a path, becoming who you would be. New and meaningful experiences are laid down more deeply, and that season of life is thick with them. The decades that follow, full as they are, settle into routine, and routine leaves a fainter trace. The story we tell of our own life leans, without our choosing it, on the years when we were first becoming ourselves. There is a quiet risk in remembering that we almost never consider. The very act of bringing a memory to mind appears to unlock it, returning it briefly to an unstable state before it is stored away again. Picture a memory not as a book pulled from a shelf and slid back unchanged, but as a document that must be reopened, to be read, and then saved once more, with whatever altered in between now written in. Researchers call this reconsolidation. When a memory is recalled, the brain seems to rebuild and refile it, and during that window it can be strengthened, weakened, or revised before it resettles. The evidence began in the laboratory, where a recalled memory could be disrupted in that fragile interval. And it has opened genuine hope for treating the grip of traumatic memory by reopening it gently and helping it settle in a softer form. There is something both unsettling and humane in this. Every time you revisit a cherished moment, you may be subtly rewriting it. The memories you return to most often, turning them over, polishing them with retelling, are precisely the ones drifting furthest from the original. To remember is, in a small way, to change what you remember. Sometimes a single life teaches science what years of study could not. In the 1950s, a man underwent surgery meant to stop severe seizures, and surgeons removed a structure deep on each side of his brain. The seizures eased, but something irreplaceable was gone. From that day, he could no longer form new, lasting memories. He met the same researchers hundreds of times across decades and greeted each visit as the first. He could hold a thought for as long as he kept it in mind, then it was lost. Yet his older memories from before the surgery remained, and remarkably, he could still learn new physical skills, improving at tasks day by day, while swearing he had never tried them. From this one man, known to the world for his lifetime only by his initials, science learned that the structure removed the hippocampus is essential for laying down new conscious memories, and that memory is not one single thing but several distinct systems that can come apart. His loss, which he bore with patience, became one of the most important sources of knowledge we have about how the mind holds on to a life. We have just seen a man who could keep nothing. Consider now the opposite and ask whether it is the blessing it sounds. A small number of people possess what is called highly superior autobiographical memory. Name a date from years ago, and they can tell you the day of the week, what they did, what the weather was, what was in the news, as if turning to that page of an inner calendar. Their recall of their own lives is extraordinarily complete, far beyond ordinary memory, and it appears to be effortless rather than trained. It sounds like a dream. For some who live with it, it is not. When every day stays vivid and within reach, so does every grief, every embarrassment, every loss. All of it as fresh as the day it happened, never softened by the merciful blurring that time grants the rest of us. Some describe being unable to let the past recede, the old wounds always close at hand. Forgetting, which we tend to think of as a flaw in memory, turns out to be part of its kindness. To carry everything is also to be unable to set anything down. Try this. Read a long string of numbers once, then look away and repeat it. You will find a ceiling, and it arrives sooner than you would expect. For all its vast storage, the part of the mind that holds information actively in the moment, juggling it for use right now, is remarkably small. For decades, the famous estimate was about 7 items, plus or minus 2. More recent work suggests the true number for unrelated pieces is smaller, still closer to 4. 4. That is roughly how many separate things you can keep genuinely in mind at one time before they begin to slip. We get around this limit with a clever trick called chunking, grouping items into meaningful units, so a long phone number becomes a few familiar pieces rather than 10 loose digits. And a chess master sees not many scattered pieces, but a few known patterns. But the underlying bottleneck is real and tight. The mind that can store the experiences of a lifetime can hold only a few fragments at once in its working hands. Nearly everything you do, every sentence you follow, every plan you weigh, is built by passing the world through that narrow gate a handful at a time. Think of falling asleep as switching off for the night. In one important sense, the brain is doing the opposite of resting. While you lie unconscious, it is busy with the work of memory, taking the loose, fragile traces of the day and binding them into lasting form. During sleep, the brain replays the patterns of recent experience, the route you walked, the skill you practiced, the facts you studied, running through them again in a kind of overnight rehearsal. This is consolidation, the transfer of fresh memories from temporary holding into more durable, integrated storage. Different stages of sleep appear to serve different parts of this work. Deep, slow-wave sleep favoring facts and events, and dreaming sleep helping with skills and emotional learning. This is why a night of good sleep after learning fixes it far better than the same hours spent awake, and why losing sleep robs you not only of alertness, but of the very memories you are trying to keep. The day's experience does not become truly yours at the moment you live it. It becomes yours in the quiet hours afterward, while you sleep in a process you never feel and never remember. Each night you leave this world and enter another one you build from nothing and almost entirely forget by morning. We have studied dreams for well over a century, with sleep labs and brain scanners and thousands of recorded reports, and still the most basic question remains open. Why do we dream at all? There is no shortage of careful ideas. Some researchers propose that dreams help consolidate memory, weaving the day into what we already know. Others suggest they let us rehearse threats in safety, or work through difficult emotion, or simply reflect the brain, making sense of random activity stirred up during sleep. Each idea has evidence in its favor, and none has settled the matter. It is an honest, open question at the heart of something every human being does every single night. We spend years of our lives in this state, generating vivid, strange emotional experiences, and we cannot yet say for sure what they are for, or whether they are for anything at all. The most universal of all our nightly journeys is one we still do not understand. Consider how much you create, and then lose every night without a trace. Across a night's sleep, a person may have several dreams, sometimes long and detailed, full of places and people and unfolding events. By the time you are fully awake, nearly all of it is gone. Within minutes of opening your eyes, the vivid dream that gripped you slips away, and often you do not even know it happened. The forgetting is not a flaw in your particular memory. It is how dreaming works for almost everyone. The chemistry of the sleeping brain shifts the very substances that help fix experience into lasting memory, so dreams are formed in conditions poorly suited to keeping them. This is why the surest way to remember a dream is to wake directly from it and hold still, recalling it at once, before it dissolves. Catch it in those first seconds, or lose it entirely. Night after night you live through whole imagined worlds, feel real fear and joy and wonder inside them, and let them go almost completely. A vast private theater plays for you every night, and you keep almost none of what you see there. Usually the dream holds us completely. We accept its impossible logic without question, swept along until we wake. But not always. Some people, while still asleep and still dreaming, suddenly realize that they are dreaming, and the realization changes everything. This is a lucid dream. The dreamer becomes aware of the dream as a dream while remaining inside it. And with that awareness, can sometimes take a measure of control, choosing where to go, what to do, even to fly. It sounds like a claim that should be impossible to verify, since the dreamer is asleep and cannot speak. Yet researchers found a way. Lucid dreamers were taught to signal with deliberate patterns of eye movement agreed in advance. And from inside the dream they moved their sleeping eyes in those exact patterns, sending a message out from within the dream to the waking world. It is one of the few times we have direct communication from a mind that is genuinely dreaming. A door, it turns out, can sometimes open in the middle of the night, and a sleeper can stand awake inside their own imagination and look around. Imagine waking in the dark, fully aware, your mind clear, and finding that you cannot move a muscle, not a finger, not your lips. You are awake inside a body that will not answer. This is sleep paralysis, and many people meet it at least once. To understand it, you have to know that during dreaming sleep, the brain deliberately paralyzes the body, switching off the muscles so that you do not physically act out your dreams. Normally, this paralysis lifts before you wake. But sometimes the timing slips and awareness returns while the body is still held in that protective stillness. The result is a few seconds or minutes of being conscious and unable to move, often accompanied by a heavy weight on the chest and a vivid sense of a presence in the room, even frightening figures as fragments of dreaming spill into waking perception. It is harmless, and it passes, but it is genuinely unsettling to live through, and across history and cultures, it has given rise to countless tales of night visitors and shadowy intruders. The mechanism that keeps you safe inside your dreams can, for a moment, leave you stranded awake at the threshold. Every organ produces waste, the byproducts of its constant work, and must have some way to clear it. For a long time, the brain posed a puzzle, since it lacks the ordinary drainage system that serves the rest of the body. So how does it keep itself clean? Part of the answer, discovered relatively recently, arrives with sleep. While you are unconscious, the brain appears to flush itself. The fluid that bathes it moves through channels that open more widely during sleepwashing through the tissue, and carrying away the waste that accumulates during waking hours, including proteins linked to brain disease. In studies, the spaces between brain cells were found to expand during sleep, letting the cleansing fluid flow more freely, as if the structure loosened to let itself be rinsed. This may be one of the deepest reasons sleep is not optional but essential, and why long stretches without it take such a toll. The night is not empty rest. It is when the mind is cleared of the residue of the day, made ready to think again. You wake clearer than you slept, in part because in the dark you were quietly washed clean. You can be certain you are awake, eyes open, looking straight ahead, and be wrong for a flickering instant. When the brain is badly short of sleep, it does not always wait politely for a safe moment to rest. It steals sleep in tiny fragments, lapses of a second or two, sometimes with the eyes still open and fixed forward. These are called microsleeps. During one, the brain briefly drops into sleep while the body holds its posture, and the eyes, their gaze, and the person almost never knows it happened. Awareness simply has a gap stitched over so smoothly that the lapse goes unnoticed from the inside. This is part of what makes severe tiredness so dangerous, especially behind the wheel, where a microsleep of a couple of seconds at speed means traveling a long stretch of road with no one watching it at all. The frightening part is exactly that you cannot feel it coming and cannot tell it has occurred. A sleep-deprived mind cannot reliably judge its own state, insisting it is fine, while quietly blinking out and back. The brain that needs rest will take it, with or without your permission, and leave you none the wiser. Push past one missed night, then another, and the mind does not merely grow tired. It begins to come apart at the edges in ways that feel almost unreal. After a long enough stretch without sleep, people start to perceive things that are not there. It begins small, a flicker at the edge of vision, a sense of movement in an empty room. With more time awake, it can deepen into vivid hallucinations, shapes and figures and sounds, and into confused, paranoid, disordered thinking that edges toward a kind of waking dream. The longer the wakefulness, the stranger the mind becomes, until in extreme cases, it struggles to tell inner experience from the outside world. This shows something important about sleep. It is not a luxury the brain can simply forego when pressed. Sleep is woven into the very stability of the mind, and without it, the careful boundary between perception and imagination starts to blur. The dreams we usually keep contained to the night begin to leak into the day. A mind kept from sleep long enough does not just want rest. It loses its grip on what is real. It arrives without warning. You are somewhere ordinary, doing something unremarkable, when a strange conviction sweeps over you that all of this exact moment has happened before in precisely this way. The feeling is unmistakable and oddly powerful, and then it fades. This is déjà vu, and most people have felt it. What makes it so curious is that it is not a memory of a real past event. It is the feeling of remembering arriving without any actual memory behind it, a sense of familiarity attached to a moment you have never lived. After a great deal of study, science still cannot fully explain it. A leading idea is that it reflects a brief misfire in the brain's familiarity systems, a moment when the machinery that tags experiences as known fires by mistake, stamping the present instant as remembered. Some clues come from people with certain forms of epilepsy who can experience intense déjà vu as a seizure begins in the memory regions of the brain. But the everyday version, the kind that visits most of us now and then, remains genuinely unresolved. It is one of the most common strange experiences a human mind can have, and one we still cannot account for. If déjà vu makes the new feel known, there is a quieter counterpart that does the reverse, turning the deeply familiar suddenly foreign. You can catch the smallest version of it on purpose. Take a common word and say it aloud over and over 20 or 30 times. At some point it loosens from its meaning and becomes only a strange noise in your mouth, a cluster of sounds you no longer recognize as a real word. This is called semantic satiation, and the larger experience it points to is jamais vu, the sense that something thoroughly familiar has become alien. A person might look at their own handwriting, a friend's face, a room they know well, and feel a disorienting wrongness, as if seeing it for the first time without recognition. It seems to come from the temporary fatigue of the very circuits that normally deliver the comfortable feeling of familiarity, which can briefly tire and fall silent. Where déjà vu adds a sense of knowing that should not be there, jamais vu strips one away that should. Both reveal the same quiet truth. The feeling of familiarity is something the brain produces and lays over the world. And like anything produced, it can falter. You know it. You absolutely know it. The name of the actor, the word for the thing, it is right there, and yet it will not come. You can feel its shape, perhaps its first letter, how many syllables it has, the very edge of it, while the word itself stays maddeningly out of reach. This is the tip of the tongue state, and it is one of the strangest small experiences the mind offers, because in it, you are aware of knowing something you cannot currently retrieve. The knowledge is plainly there. The path to it is blocked. What makes it remarkable is that the mind can sense the presence of a memory it cannot access, accurately judging that the word exists and is yours, even guessing features of it all without producing it. Researchers study it precisely because it reveals that knowing a thing and retrieving a thing are separate steps that can fail independently. Often the word surfaces later unbidden once you have stopped chasing it. The experience is a small, vivid demonstration that your mind holds more than it can hand you on demand. and sometimes lets you feel the very edge of what it is withholding. A fragment of a tune begins to play in your head, and then it will not stop. Around and around it goes, the same few bars looping on its own, long after you wanted it gone. Almost everyone knows this, the song stuck in the mind, what researchers call an earworm. It tends to be a short, catchy stretch of melody, often not even the whole song, but one snatch of it repeating without your consent. Studies have looked closely at why this happens and how to make it stop. The loop seems to live in the part of the mind that handles sound and rehearsal, caught in a kind of cognitive itch that replaying only scratches. And researchers have found things that help. Engaging the mind with an absorbing task can crowd the loop out, and curiously, simply hearing or imagining the song all the way to its end can release it, letting the unfinished loop finally close. Even working on a moderately demanding puzzle has been shown to ease an earworm's hold. There is something humbling in it. A scrap of melody can take up residence in your mind and play itself on repeat, and you, the one whose mind it is, cannot simply command it to be quiet. You learn a new word, and within days you seem to hear it constantly. You consider a particular car, and suddenly that same model is on every road. It feels as though the world has rearranged itself around your new interest. It has not. What has changed is you. This is the frequency illusion, sometimes called the recency illusion, and it grows from two quiet habits of the mind working together. Once something has your attention, the brain begins to notice it where it always was, but you previously filtered out, since attention acts as a selective gate. And then a second habit confirms the pattern, your mind reading each new sighting as evidence that the thing really is everywhere now. The word was always in use. The car was always on the road. They simply passed beneath your notice until the moment you were primed to catch them, and now each appearance feels like a small confirmation. It is a gentle reminder of how much of the world streams past you unregistered at every moment, and how the act of attending does not just find things. It reshapes how present they feel, turning the unnoticed into the apparently everywhere. Stand in a loud gathering, voices overlapping, music playing, and you can follow one conversation, while the rest blurs into a wash of sound you have tuned out. Then somewhere across the room, in a conversation you were not listening to, someone says your name, and it reaches you instantly, sharp and clear. This is the cocktail party effect, and it reveals something subtle about attention. You are not consciously hearing those other conversations, yet some part of the mind was monitoring them all along beneath awareness, scanning the ignored stream for anything that matters. Your own name matters, and so it breaks through the filter and seizes your attention. This means the sounds you are not attending to are not simply discarded. They are processed quietly in the background, just enough to flag what is important, so that a meaningful word can summon your focus, even when you never chose to listen. The mind is screening far more of the world than it ever shows you, sifting the noise on your behalf, ready to tap you on the shoulder the moment your name or anything that concerns you drifts within reach. Listen for a moment to the inside of your own head. For most people, there is a voice there, soundless, yet unmistakably a voice, narrating the day, rehearsing what to say, arguing both sides of a worry, reading these very words aloud in the quiet of the mind. This is the inner voice, inner speech, and we lean on it constantly, often without noticing we are doing it. It is how many of us think through a problem, talk ourselves through a hard moment, hold a plan together, or simply keep ourselves company. The voice can sound like us, take on the tones of others, shift between a running commentary and a back-and-forth dialogue. It appears closely tied to the brain systems we use for actual speech, as though thinking in words borrows the machinery of speaking them, only held silent. We so take it for granted that it can feel like thought itself, rather than one particular form of thinking. Much of your mental life may be conducted in this silent, wordy stream, a private conversation that never reaches the air, running quietly behind your eyes through nearly every waking hour. We tend to assume that the way our own mind works is simply the way minds work. The inner voice feels so basic that it is natural to take it as universal. It is not. Some people have no inner voice at all. They do not experience that silent narration, that running commentary in words, and they may live for decades without realizing anything is different. Until one day they learn that many people think in a constant stream of inner speech and are genuinely astonished. To them, the idea of a voice talking inside the head sounds almost like a figure of speech made literal. They think, plan and reason perfectly well, but they do it in other ways, perhaps in concepts, in images, in something harder to put into words. This variation is only beginning to be studied carefully, and it sits alongside a broader truth that researchers keep rediscovering. The inner life is not the same from one person to the next. What feels like a fundamental feature of having a mind may be one option among several. The person beside you may be moving through the world in a mental landscape quietly, profoundly unlike your own, and neither of you would ever know without asking. Close your eyes and picture an apple. For most people, something appears, an image of an apple, faint or vivid there in the mind's eye. Now consider that for some people, nothing appears at all. Asked to picture the apple, they see only darkness. They know what an apple is, can describe it perfectly, but cannot conjure any image of one. This is called aphantasia, the absence of voluntary visual imagery, and like the missing inner voice, many who have it spend years assuming everyone is the same. The talk of seeing things in the mind is only a manner of speaking. When they discover that others genuinely picture scenes, faces, memories in something like sight, it can be a quiet shock. People with aphantasia remember and imagine and create without that inner screen drawing on knowledge and concepts and feeling rather than pictures. Some cannot summon the face of someone they love, however well they know it. At the other extreme are those whose mental images are as rich and detailed as real seeing. The mind's eye, which feels like a fixed part of being human, varies enormously from person to person, from a vivid inner cinema to no picture at all. Each one, certain their own way, is simply how it is. A certain scent drifts past, and without warning you are somewhere else entirely. A grandmother's kitchen, a particular summer, a room you had not thought of in years returning, not as a fact recalled, but as a feeling whole and immediate, with an emotional force that surprises you. Smell does this more powerfully than any other sense, reaching past thought, straight into memory and emotion. The reason lies in how the brain is wired. Most of what we sense is routed first through a relay station deep in the brain, before reaching the regions that handle memory and feeling. Smell takes a more direct path. The sense of smell connects almost immediately to the structures tied to emotion and memory, with fewer steps in between an old and intimate arrangement. This is why a scent can unlock a memory, so vivid and so laden with feeling that it seems to bypass words altogether, arriving before you can name what triggered it. A photograph shows you the past from the outside. A smell can drop you back inside it. Of all the doors into memory, the one opened by scent is the most direct, and often the most quietly overwhelming. Ask a child how long it is until summer, and the answer is forever. Ask someone older where the year has gone, and they will tell you it vanished. Time seems to accelerate as we age, the same months passing faster with each decade, and the feeling is nearly universal. Part of the explanation is simple proportion. To a young child, a year is a vast slice of all the life they have known, while to an older person, it is one small fraction of a long accumulation, and so it weighs less. But there is a deeper reason, rooted in novelty. The mind seems to measure remembered time by how much new experience it contains. Childhood and youth are crowded with firsts, with unfamiliar places and people and feelings, and the brain lays down dense, detailed memories of all that newness. So those years feel rich and long in retrospect. As life settles into routine, days grow similar. Fewer fresh memories are formed, and whole stretches compress into very little. This is why a week of travel can feel longer in memory than months of ordinary routine. To slow time, in a sense, is to fill it with the new, which is perhaps why the unfamiliar stays with us, and the habitual slips quietly away. In the instant of a crash, a fall, a sudden danger, people often report the same strange thing. Time slowed down. The moment seemed to stretch every detail, sharp and unhurried, as though the world had shifted into a lower gear and granted them extra seconds inside the emergency. It is a vivid, widely shared experience, and it raises a real question. Does the mind actually speed up in a crisis? Perceiving more in each instant, researchers tested this directly, putting volunteers through genuinely frightening rapid experiences and checking whether they could truly see faster than normal during them. They could not. Their perception in the moment was no quicker than usual. What had changed was the memory. Under intense fear, the brain lays down an unusually dense and detailed record of the event, and when we later recall it all, that packed detail makes the moment seem to have lasted longer than it did. The slowing is real as an experience, but it lives in the remembering, not in the living. Time did not actually stretch when danger struck. The mind simply wrote that moment in far more ink than usual, and reading it back we mistake the richness for length. You are absorbed in something facing away, and a feeling creeps over you that someone behind you is watching. You turn, and often someone is. This quiet experience is nearly universal, the sense of being watched, and it carries an almost uncanny weight, as if some hidden sense were reaching out behind you. The honest scientific picture is more grounded and in its way more interesting. We are exquisitely sensitive to gaze tuned from infancy, to detect when eyes are turned toward us, and the brain has dedicated machinery for reading where another's attention points. Much of the feeling likely comes from subtle cues we gather, without noticing a shift, caught at the edge of vision, a small sound, a change in a room sensed below the level of awareness, which the mind assembles into that prickling certainty. And there is a quieter reason it feels so reliable. You tend to remember the times you turned and were right, and forget the many times you turned and no one was there. The feeling is real, and the sensitivity behind it is real, finely honed by a long history of living among others whose attention mattered. But it reaches us through ordinary senses gathered quietly, rather than through any power beyond them. Watch another person pick up a cup, and something happens in your brain that blurs the line between doing and seeing. Among the cells that fire when you reach for that cup yourself, some also fire when you merely watch someone else reach for theirs. These are called mirror neurons, first found in the brains of monkeys, where certain cells responded both when the animal grasped a peanut and when it saw a researcher grasp one. The same kind of mirroring appears to operate in us. As you observe another person's action, your motor system quietly rehearses it, mapping their movement onto your own, as if part of you were performing the act alongside them. Researchers believe this internal echo may be part of how we understand one another so readily, grasping another's intention, not by cold reasoning, but by feeling a faint version of it in ourselves. The exact role of these cells in human social life is still debated, and claims about them have sometimes outrun the evidence, but the core finding holds. When you watch someone act, you are not a detached observer. Some inner part of you is moving with them, which may be one of the quiet roots of how deeply we are able to read each other. Read the word yawn, or watch someone do it, and you may feel the pull yourself before you finish this sentence. Yawning is contagious, and it is only the most obvious of a whole set of things that pass quietly between people. A genuine laugh can set off others. A room's tension can settle into your own shoulders. Spend time with someone anxious or low, and you may find the feeling has seeped into you, caught almost like a cold. Researchers call this emotional contagion, and it appears to run partly through automatic mimicry, the way we unconsciously copy the expressions, postures, and tones of those around us, and then feel a faint echo of the emotion that goes with them. Contagious yawning is stronger between people who are close, and it appears tied to empathy, weaker in those who connect less easily with others. This quiet transmission is part of what binds groups together, syncing mood and attention without a word spoken. You are far more porous to the people around you than you tend to realize, picking up their states through 1,000 small unconscious channels and passing your own along in return. See someone strike their hand hard in a door and you wince. You feel a flicker of it yourself, a small inward flinch at a hurt that is not yours. That flinch is more than a figure of speech. When people watch another person in pain, brain imaging shows activity in some of the very regions that register their own pain, particularly the parts that carry pain's emotional sting rather than its raw physical location. In a real sense, the brain responds to another's suffering by partly reproducing the experience of suffering inside itself. This appears to be a foundation of empathy, a way of understanding another's pain, not as abstract information, but as something faintly felt mirrored in your own circuitry. The strength of this response varies from person to person and tends to be greater toward those we feel close to or see as like us. It is a quietly remarkable arrangement. We are built so that the suffering of another can reach across and stir the machinery of our own, so that we do not merely observe pain in others, but in a muted and protective way, taste a trace of it ourselves. Compassion may begin in something as physical as this. A small child watches as a toy is hidden in a basket while another child is out of the room. Ask where the returning child will look for it, and a very young child points to where the toy truly is now. They cannot yet imagine that the other child who did not see it moved will hold a false belief and look in the old place. Then, somewhere around the age of 4, this changes. The child comes to understand that other people have minds of their own, with their own knowledge, beliefs, and viewpoints that may differ from their own, and even be wrong. Researchers call this achievement theory of mind, and its arrival is one of the great quiet turning points of early life. With it, a whole social world opens. The child can now deceive and detect deception, keep a secret, feel true empathy, understand that a friend might not know what they know. Nearly everything intricate in human social life, from kindness to teasing to cooperation, rests on this capacity to model the unseen minds of others. We are so steeped in it as adults that we forget it had to be built. There was a time for each of us when other people had no separate inner world, and then a time, soon after, when they did. It seems obvious that a person in trouble is safest where the most people can see them. The truth runs unsettlingly the other way. Studies of helping behavior have found that the more bystanders are present when someone needs help, the less likely any single one of them is to step forward. This is the bystander effect, and it works through a few quiet mechanisms. When many are present, responsibility feels diffused, spread so thin across the crowd that each person feels less of it personally, assuming someone else will surely act. And in an ambiguous moment, people glance around to judge how serious it is, and seeing everyone else hesitate, each takes the group's stillness as a sign that nothing is truly wrong. So the very size of the crowd that should mean more help can mean less, each person waiting, each reassured by the others waiting. Understanding this changes how to ask for help in an emergency, where the advice is to single out one person directly, breaking them free of the crowd's paralysis by making the responsibility unmistakably theirs. It is a hard truth about how the presence of others reshapes what we feel we must do, and a useful one to carry. We speak of a broken heart, of being hurt by rejection, and treat the words as metaphor, a poetic borrowing from real physical pain. They may be closer to literal than we assume. When people experience social rejection, being excluded, left out, cast off, brain imaging reveals activity in some of the same regions that respond to physical pain, particularly the parts that carry pain's distressing, hurtful quality. The brain appears to process the ache of social loss along pathways it also uses for bodily injury, as though it treats the threat of being cut off from others as a genuine kind of wound. There is a deep logic to this. For our distant ancestors to be excluded from the group was not a mere disappointment, but a real danger to survival. So a strong alarm against social loss would have been worth having. This is why loneliness can genuinely hurt, why rejection can feel like something physical, and why isolation takes a measurable toll on health. The pain of being apart from others is not weakness or imagination. It is the mind sounding an old and serious alarm, built deep, telling you that connection is not a luxury, but something you were made to need. In a frightening moment, reach for the hand of someone you trust, and something measurable happens. The body's alarm quiets. The simple act of being touched by someone we feel safe with can lower the physical signs of stress, calm the racing systems of fear, and even ease the experience of pain itself. In studies, people facing the threat of a mild shock showed calmer brain responses when holding the hand of a loved one, and the closer and more trusted the person, the greater the soothing. Touch from a partner has been found to reduce reported pain, to slow a stressed heart, to settle the body in ways that words alone cannot reach. This appears woven deep into us present from the very start of life. When an infant is calmed by being held long before it understands a single word, we never entirely outgrow it. Beneath all our independence, the nervous system keeps listening for the reassurance of safe touch, reading it as a signal that we are not facing the world alone. A hand in yours does more than comfort the heart. It quietly tells the body it is safe, and the body, listening, eases. Give a person a pill that contains no medicine at all, only sugar, and tell them it will help, and remarkably, often it does. Their pain eases, their symptoms lift real and measurable improvement, following a treatment that by itself does nothing. This is the placebo effect, and it is one of the most studied and genuinely strange phenomena in all of medicine. The relief is not imaginary or merely reported. Belief and expectation can set off real changes in the body, including the release of the brain's own pain-relieving chemicals, so that expecting to feel better actually helps produce feeling better. The effect is strong enough that every new drug must be tested against a placebo to see whether it does more than belief alone. Stranger still, placebos can work to a degree even when people are told outright that they are taking a sugar pill. And the ritual of treatment, the white coat, the careful instructions, the very color and size of a pill, all shape how powerfully it works. The mind, it turns out, is not a passive recipient of healing. It is a participant, capable of reaching into the body and shifting real symptoms on the strength of what it expects. If expecting to feel better can ease real symptoms, expecting to feel worse can do the reverse. This is the placebo's darker twin, called the nocebo effect, and it is just as real. When people are warned of a side effect, they more often go on to suffer it, even from a pill that contains nothing at all. Tell someone a harmless substance may cause headache or nausea, and a meaningful number will develop exactly that, conjured by expectation alone. In drug trials, people taking the inert sugar pill regularly report the very side effects they were cautioned about, suffering from a treatment that physically cannot cause them. The anticipation of harm can produce genuine pain, real discomfort, measurable distress. This poses a genuine puzzle for medicine, since honestly warning patients about possible side effects can itself help bring those side effects on. It reveals the same deep truth as the placebo seen from its shadow side. The mind's expectations reach into the body in both directions, able to heal and able to harm, and the simple belief that something will hurt you can be enough on its own to make it so. We assume the order is fixed. First you feel happy, and then you smile. The smile is the result, the feeling, the cause. It may not be quite so one-directional. There is evidence that the body's expressions feed back into our emotions, so that arranging your face into a smile can nudge your mood upward, however slightly, as if the feeling took a cue from the face. In studies exploring this, people induced to engage the muscles of a smile, sometimes without even knowing that was the aim, tended to rate things as a little more pleasant. This is the facial feedback idea, that our expressions do not merely broadcast emotion outward, but also inform the emotion we feel, the body and the mind reading each other in a loop. The effect is modest and has been debated and tested carefully, with researchers working to pin down how reliable it is and when it holds. But the underlying picture is intriguing and humane. Emotion is not purely a signal sent down from the mind to the body. The body talks back, and the set of your face, the posture you hold, may quietly shape the feeling you take yourself to be simply expressing. We like to think we hold our beliefs because the evidence led us there. Far more often the believing comes first, and the evidence is gathered afterward to fit. Once the mind has settled on a view, it begins without any sense of doing so to favor whatever supports that view and to slide past whatever contradicts it. This is confirmation bias, and it runs through nearly all our thinking. We notice the facts that agree with us and let the others go unremarked. We read the article that confirms our position and find the opposing one somehow less convincing. We remember the times we were right and forget the times we were not. Even handed the very same evidence, two people who already disagree can each walk away more sure of what they believed before, each having mined the same material for their own side. It is not stupidity and not dishonesty. It is the quiet default setting of a mind that finds it easier to defend a belief than to revise it. The unsettling part is how invisible it feels from the inside, where biased searching feels exactly like simply looking at the facts. To think clearly may require, above all, the discipline of seeking out what would prove us wrong. Here is something that should not work, and reliably does. Show a person a number, any number, even one they know to be random and meaningless, and their next judgment will quietly drift toward it. In a striking demonstration, people watched a wheel of fortune land on a number plainly by chance, and were then asked to estimate an unrelated quantity, such as how many nations belonged to a certain group. Those who had seen a high number guessed higher. Those who saw a low one guessed lower, pulled toward a figure they knew was pure luck. This is anchoring, and it shapes judgment everywhere. The first price, named in a negotiation, the initial figure on a price tag, the opening offer, all set an anchor that tugs every later number toward it, even when we believe we have dismissed it. The mind, faced with uncertainty, seems to grab whatever number is nearby as a starting point and adjust from there, never adjusting quite far enough. It works on experts and novices alike, and knowing about it offers surprisingly little protection. The figures that drift past us, even the irrelevant ones, leave a quiet gravity behind, bending the very judgments we feel we are making freely. Which is more dangerous, a shark or a falling vending machine? Most people feel certain it is the shark, and most people are mistaken. We tend to judge how likely something is by how easily an example springs to mind, a mental shortcut that often serves us and sometimes badly misleads. This is the availability heuristic. Dramatic, vivid, frequently reported events, the plane crash, the shark attack, the lurid crime come to mind readily, and so we overestimate how common they are. Quiet, ordinary dangers that rarely make the news feel rarer than they are, however many lives they actually take. The result is a world map of risk, drawn not by true frequency, but by how memorable and available each danger is. We fear the rare and spectacular, and shrug at the common and dull. Our sense of likelihood quietly distorted by what the mind can most easily picture. It explains why people often fear the wrong things, why a single dramatic story can reshape public worry overnight, and why our intuitions about danger so often part ways with the actual numbers. The ease of recall, mistaken for the truth of frequency, leads us astray in ways we almost never notice. Imagine finding a sum of money in the street and the small lift it brings. Now imagine losing that same sum, and notice that the sting of the loss feels sharper, heavier than the pleasure of the gain. This is not just you. For most people, losses loom larger than equivalent gains. The pain of losing something, outweighing the joy of gaining the very same thing. Researchers call this loss aversion, and it quietly shapes an enormous range of our choices. We hold on to things we own past all reason because giving them up registers as a loss. We play it safe to avoid a possible loss, even when a bolder choice would serve us better. We feel a setback more keenly than a matching success. This tilt runs deep, and it likely served our ancestors well. Since in a harsh world, a loss could mean ruin, while a missed gain merely meant staying as you were, so caution paid. But in modern life, it can lead us astray, making us overly cautious, reluctant to let go, prone to clutching what we have. The simple asymmetry that losing hurts more than gaining pleases sits quietly beneath a great deal of how we weigh nearly every decision we make. We assume our actions follow from our beliefs, that we do what we do because of what we think. Often it runs backward, and we adjust what we think to fit what we have already done. When a person's actions clash with their beliefs, the mismatch creates a genuine discomfort, an inner tension that the mind is driven to relieve. This is cognitive dissonance. And the easiest way to ease it is rarely to change the action which is already done, but to quietly change the belief until the two no longer conflict. In a classic study, people who were paid very little to claim a dull task was interesting later rated it as genuinely more enjoyable, having unconsciously revised their opinion to justify what they had said for so small a reason. We talk ourselves into liking what we chose, into approving of what we did, into believing the effort was worth it, smoothing away the tension between deed and belief by reshaping the belief. It means our convictions are not always the firm foundation we take them for. Sometimes they are adjusted after the fact, quietly rewritten to keep peace with the things we have already done. You spill something on your shirt, stumble on a step, say something awkward, and you feel certain everyone saw that the moment is glaring and unforgettable to all who witnessed it. Here is the quiet relief. They mostly did not notice and have already forgotten. We consistently overestimate how much other people notice and remember about us, a tendency researchers call the spotlight effect. We feel ourselves to be at the center of a spotlight, our flaws and stumbles brightly lit for an attentive audience, when in truth, others are far less focused on us than we imagine. In one study, people made to wear an embarrassing shirt were sure that nearly everyone around them had noticed it, while in reality, only a small fraction had. The reason is simple enough. You are the constant center of your own experience, intensely aware of yourself, and you forget that everyone else is the center of theirs, just as absorbed in their own concerns. The audience you imagine scrutinizing you is mostly busy worrying about its own performance. There is a real freedom in absorbing this. The mistakes you replay with such cringing detail were to nearly everyone else. A passing blur, barely seen and quickly gone. Your heart is pounding, your hands unsteady, your breath quick. Why? The body sends the signals of arousal, but it does not always label them correctly, and the mind reaching for an explanation can attach them to the wrong cause. In a famous study, men crossed either a high swaying suspension bridge or a low stable one, and on the far side each met the same woman who gave them her number. Those who had crossed the frightening bridge were far more likely to call her later. Their bodies were stirred by the height and the danger, but a number of them seemed to have read that racing heart as attraction to her. This is the misattribution of arousal. The body produces a state of heightened arousal, and the mind, needing a story, picks the most available explanation nearby, sometimes the wrong one. It hints at something strange about emotion. The physical stirring of fear and the stirring of attraction are not as different in the body as they feel from the inside, and which one we believe we are feeling can depend on what the mind decides the pounding heart is about. Our feelings are not simply read off the body, they are interpreted, and the interpretation can go astray. There is a strange relationship between how much we know and how much we think we know. Often, the less someone actually understands about a skill, the more confident they feel about their grasp of it. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect. The very lack of knowledge that makes a person perform poorly also robs them of the ability to see that they are performing poorly. Since recognizing your mistakes requires the same expertise you are missing, so those with the least skill can hold the highest confidence, blind to the gap, while genuine experts, keenly aware of all they do not know, often rate themselves more modestly. The incompetence and the overconfidence spring from the same root, the absence of the knowledge needed to judge oneself accurately. It is humbling to consider, because it applies to everyone in some domain. In the areas where you know least, you are also least equipped to sense how little you know and may feel a confidence you have not earned. True expertise often arrives wearing humility, an awareness of complexity and of one's own limits, while the loudest certainty sometimes marks the shallowest understanding. The mind cannot easily see the edges of its own ignorance. Notice how late in a long day of choices, the small decisions start to feel strangely heavy, and you reach for whatever is easiest. There is a real phenomenon here, though. One researchers are still actively testing and debating. The idea called decision fatigue holds that making choices draws on a limited reserve of mental energy, and that as the day fills with decisions, that reserve runs lower, leaving later choices more prone to shortcuts, impulse, or simple avoidance. A much discussed study of judges reviewing parole cases reported that favorable rulings were more common earlier in the day and after breaks, and grew rarer as sessions wore on, as if weariness tilted them toward the easier default of saying no. The size and even the existence of this effect are genuinely contested, and scientists are still working to pin down how much our self-control truly depletes over a day. But the everyday sense of it is familiar. The willpower and clear judgment that feel abundant in the morning can feel thin by night when we are most likely to give in, give up, or simply choose whatever asks the least of us. Even the act of choosing, it seems, may have a cost. Think back to a long experience, a difficult medical procedure, a vacation, a hard day. You might assume your memory of it reflects the whole stretch averaged across every minute. It does not. We tend to judge and remember an experience largely by two moments: its most intense point and its ending, while the sheer length of it counts for surprisingly little. Researchers call this the peak-end rule. A longer ordeal that finishes gently can be remembered as better than a shorter one that ends at its worst, because the final moments weigh so heavily in the memory. In studies, people who underwent an uncomfortable procedure that was extended with a few extra minutes of milder discomfort at the end remembered the whole thing as less unpleasant than those whose procedure stopped at its painful peak, even though the longer version contained more total discomfort. The mind does not tally up every moment and divide. It grabs the peak and the ending and lets them stand for the whole. This is why how something finishes can color the entire memory of it, and why the last impression of an experience carries a weight far out of proportion to its length. For most of the last century, science held that the brain was fixed in adulthood, fully formed and unchanging, set hard, like clay that had dried. The picture we now hold is very different and far more hopeful. The adult brain reshapes itself continually in response to what we do. The connections between its cells strengthening, weakening, forming, and fading according to how we use them. This is neuroplasticity. Learn a new skill, and the territory devoted to it grows and refines. Practice something daily, and the pathways it depends on are reinforced. Neglect an ability, and the ground it occupied is gradually given over to other uses. The brain is not a finished structure we simply carry through life. It is something closer to a living landscape, quietly remade by the rivers of our repeated experience, by what we attend to practice and return to again and again. This is why recovery after injury is possible, why we can keep learning late into life, why habits carve themselves so deep, and it carries a quiet weight. What you repeatedly do think and attend to is in a slow and literal way, shaping the physical organ you will think with tomorrow. You are day by day helping to build the brain you will become. In one city, becoming a licensed driver of its famous cabs demands something extraordinary. The memorizing of a vast tangle of thousands of streets and countless landmarks held entirely in the mind, a feat of navigation that takes years to master. Researchers saw a rare opportunity in this, a chance to watch what such intense, sustained learning does to a living brain. What they found is striking. In these drivers, a region tied to spatial memory and navigation, the hippocampus was measurably enlarged compared to others, and it had grown larger the longer a driver had been doing the work. The very act of holding an entire city's map in mind year after year had left a physical mark, expanding the part of the brain that does the holding. Here in flesh was neuroplasticity made visible. It is one of the clearest demonstrations we have that sustained mental effort does not merely fill the mind with knowledge, but reshapes the organ itself, growing the regions we lean on hardest. The brain devotes more of itself to what we ask of it most, building up the ground beneath our deepest, most practiced skills, until the demand of a lifetime's work is written into its very structure. Hold in mind the simple cost of thinking. The brain makes up only a small fraction of your body's weight, roughly 1/50th of it, a modest organ you could hold in 2 hands. Yet it consumes around 1/5 of all the energy your body uses, a share wildly out of proportion to its size, and it does so constantly, even when you are sitting still and feel as though you are doing nothing at all. This hunger never switches off. The brain is among the most energy-demanding tissue you possess, burning fuel ceaselessly to keep its vast network of cells charged, signaling, and ready day and night, awake and asleep. There is no idle setting. Even in rest, even in deep sleep, it draws heavily, humming with activity that never fully stops while you live. This enormous, continuous energy cost is one reason the brain is so vulnerable to any interruption of its supply, why even a brief loss of blood flow does harm so quickly. The seat of all your thought is a small and quietly ravenous thing, demanding 1/5 of everything you take in, simply to remain itself the most expensive organ you own, and never for an instant truly at rest. We place the mind firmly in the head and think of the belly as a simple machine for digestion. The truth is more entangled and more interesting. Lining the gut is a vast network of nerve cells so extensive that it is sometimes called a second brain, capable of operating with a surprising degree of independence. And it is in constant conversation with the brain above. The two, linked by a major nerve that carries a steady traffic of signals, much of it flowing upward from gut to brain rather than down. This gut-brain dialogue appears to shape far more than digestion. The state of the gut, including the immense community of microbes living within it, has been linked to mood, stress, and emotion in ways researchers are only beginning to map. It may be part of why feelings register so physically in the belly, why distress can churn the stomach, why we speak of a gut feeling as a kind of knowing. The science here is young and unfolding, and much remains uncertain. But the old, clean separation of thinking head and mere digesting body is dissolving. The mind, it seems, is not sealed in the skull, but in quiet, constant conversation with the body that carries it. What is fear from the inside? We tend to think of an emotion as a pure mental event, a feeling that then happens to ripple through the body. A growing body of thought suggests it may work the other way round, that much of emotion begins in the body and is then read by the mind. The heart races, the breath quickens, the stomach tightens, the muscles tense, and the brain, perceiving these bodily changes, interprets them, assembling them into the feeling we name as fear or excitement or anger. On this view, you do not simply feel afraid and then tremble. The trembling, the pounding, the rush are part of what the feeling is made of, raw material the mind reads and labels. This is why the same bodily stirring can become different emotions depending on what the mind decides is happening, and why learning to sense the body's signals more clearly can change our emotional life. Emotion in this picture is not a message sent purely from mind to body, but a meaning the brain constructs from the body's own report. The feelings that seem to arise so purely in the mind may be in large part the mind making sense of the living body it inhabits. You finish a task, let your gaze go soft, and stop concentrating on anything in particular. You might think the brain quiets, now settling toward idle. The opposite happens. The moment you stop focusing outward, a particular network of brain regions switches on and grows active, and the mind begins to wander, drifting into memory, into the future, into imagined conversations and replayed scenes. This is the default mode network, named because it is the brain's default state when not engaged with the outside world. It is the machinery of daydreaming, of thinking about yourself and others, of mentally traveling backward and forward in time. Far from resting, the unfocused brain turns inward and busies itself with the inner world. This network is deeply tied to our sense of self, to autobiographical memory, to imagining the minds of others, and it consumes a great deal of energy, even though it produces nothing outwardly visible. It may be where a wandering mind does some of its quiet, important work, reflecting, planning, making sense of who we are. When you appear to be doing nothing, lost in thought, your brain is in fact running one of its most characteristic and demanding programs, the one that builds and maintains the ongoing story of you. The mind wanders, constantly slipping from the present into thoughts of elsewhere, and we often imagine this drifting as a small pleasure, a mental escape. Researchers set out to test what it actually does to how we feel. Using a method that pinged thousands of people at random moments through their days, asking what they were doing, whether their minds were on it, and how happy they felt. They gathered a vast record of ordinary experience. The pattern that emerged was sobering. People's minds were wandering a large share of the time regardless of what they were doing, and when minds wandered, people were generally less happy than when they were absorbed in the present, even if the wandering led somewhere pleasant. A wandering mind, the researchers concluded, tends to be an unhappy one. Engagement with the moment, whatever the moment held, was more closely tied to well-being than drifting away from it. There is a quiet lesson folded into this one many traditions have long taught in their own words. Some real part of our happiness lies not in where our circumstances take us, but in whether we are actually present for our own lives here, in the thing we are doing, rather than away in thought. There is a particular state you may have touched, without naming it, when you are so completely absorbed in what you are doing that everything else falls away. The clock stops mattering. The chatter of self-consciousness goes quiet. Hours pass like minutes, and you and the activity seem to merge into one seamless motion. Researchers call this flow. It tends to arrive when a task is challenging enough to demand your full engagement, yet matched well enough to your skill that you can meet it, holding you in a place of total, effortless involvement. In flow, the constant background hum of the self, the monitoring, the worrying, the awareness of being a person doing a thing quietly dissolves, and with it the ordinary sense of time. People describe it as among the most satisfying states they know, whether it comes through music, sport, craft work, or play. It seems to arise when the self stops standing apart to watch, and simply becomes the doing. There is something telling in the fact that some of our deepest contentment comes not from thinking about ourselves, but from disappearing into something else entirely. The self most at ease, it seems, when it briefly forgets to be a self at all. We have seen that the brain is shaped by what we repeatedly do. Consider then what happens when people deliberately train one thing, the steady practice of attention itself. In studies of meditation where attention is turned again and again gently back to the present, researchers have found measurable changes in the brain after weeks of practice. Regions tied to attention, to emotional regulation, to awareness of the body, have shown changes in structure and activity in those who practice consistently, even over programs lasting only a couple of months. The mind, trained towards stillness and focus, appears to leave a mark on the very tissue doing the focusing. The findings are still being refined, and researchers are careful about how large and lasting these changes truly are. But the direction is clear and consistent with everything we know of plasticity. Attention is not a fixed trait you simply have or lack. It is something closer to a capacity that can be cultivated, strengthened by practice, the way a muscle is, and the practice writes itself faintly into the brain. What this suggests is quietly empowering. The quality of your attention, which shapes so much of the quality of your life, is not fixed. It can be trained. You feel yourself to be one continuous person, the same self who woke this morning, who lived through childhood, who will go to sleep tonight, a single unbroken thread running through all your years. This sense of a unified, persisting self is one of the most powerful experiences we have. It may also be in significant part something the mind constructs and continually maintains. A story rather than a simple fact. The brain weaves the scattered pieces, memories, sensations, thoughts, intentions, into a coherent narrative of a single ongoing person, and that narrative is so seamless that we never see the weaving. We have already glimpsed how much of it is built, that memory is reconstructed, that the brain fills gaps and invents reasons, that split brains can hold two streams at once. The self that ties it all together may be the grandest of these constructions, a story the mind tells so well and so constantly that we mistake the telling for the teller. This does not make the self false or unreal. The story is genuinely yours, and you genuinely live it, but it is worth knowing that the solid, simple I you feel at your center is, in part, an ongoing act of authorship quietly performed. Faced with its own actions, the mind is rarely at a loss for a reason, even when it has no real access to the true one. We saw this earlier with the split-brain patients, and it deserves a closer look because what those patients revealed runs through all of us. When the speaking half of such a brain was shown an action driven by the other silent half, an action it had no knowledge of, it did not say, "I do not know why I did that." Instead, it instantly produced a confident, sensible-sounding explanation, invented on the spot, and believed completely. Researchers named the system behind this the interpreter, a part of the mind whose job seems to be making sense of our own behavior, generating reasons, telling a coherent story, whether or not it has the facts. The unsettling part is that it does this constantly in all of us, not only in patients. We act, and the interpreter supplies a reason, and we take that reason for the truth. We are much of the time explaining ourselves to ourselves after the fact, confidently narrating motives we never actually had access to. The mind would rather offer a smooth, certain story than admit it does not know why it did what it did. There is a feeling so basic we rarely notice it, the sense that you are the one doing your actions, that your hand moves because you moved it. This feeling of agency seems like it must be a direct readout of reality. It is not. It is something the brain constructs, and it can be manipulated. In clever experiments, people have been made to feel they caused an action that was actually performed by someone else, simply by timing things so that their intention seemed to line up with the result. In other setups, people genuinely performing an action have been stripped of the feeling that they did it. The sense of authorship, it turns out, is not bolted directly to the actual command your brain sends to your muscles. It is inferred, assembled from cues like whether an action matched what you expected and happened when you anticipated. Usually these cues line up and the feeling is accurate. But the feeling and the fact can be pulled apart, which is part of what makes certain conditions so strange, where people feel their movements are controlled by outside forces. The deep conviction that you are the author of your own deeds is, like so much else, a construction the mind quietly performs. Try right now to tickle yourself. You cannot, not really. The same touch that would make you squirm from another hand does almost nothing from your own, and the reason opens a small window onto how the brain works. Whenever you move, your brain generates a prediction of the sensations that movement will produce, a forecast of what you're about to feel. When the prediction matches what arrives, as it does with your own touch, the brain quiets the sensation, treating it as expected and unremarkable since it caused it itself. This is why your own touch feels muted, predicted away, while an unpredictable touch from outside, which the brain cannot forecast, retains its full surprising force. The system exists for good reason. The brain must constantly distinguish sensations it causes from sensations the world imposes, dampening its own, so it can stay alert to the genuinely new. The humble fact that you cannot tickle yourself is a direct demonstration of this prediction at work, the mind cancelling the expected to make room for the surprising. It is a small, almost comic proof of something profound, that your brain is forever modeling its own actions a step ahead and feels the world through that model. We tend to picture the aging mind as simply declining, a slow dimming across the board. The truth is more layered and far kinder than that. Some mental abilities do fade. With age, the quickness of processing, the nimbleness at solving novel puzzles, the raw speed of taking in something entirely new. Researchers call this fluid ability, and it tends to peak relatively early and gently decline. But there is another kind of capacity that runs the opposite way. The store of accumulated knowledge, vocabulary, understanding, the deep familiarity with how the world and people work. What researchers call crystallized ability keeps growing and can stay strong, or even improve well into late life. The aging mind is not simply losing, it is trading speed for depth, raw processing for a vast accumulated understanding earned only by living. This is why older people often bring a richer grasp of meaning, of context, of how things fit together, even as quick novel tasks grow harder. The picture of aging as pure decline is too simple. The mind reshapes its strengths over a lifetime, and some of its most valuable capacities, the ones built slowly from everything we have learned and lived, are still deepening when others have begun to fade. Ask people of different ages how they feel from day to day, and a surprising pattern emerges, one that overturns the gloomy assumption that aging means growing sadness. In many studies, older adults report greater emotional stability, and on average as much or more contentment than the young, handling difficult feelings with a steadier hand. With age, often comes a quiet competence at managing emotion that youth, for all its energy, rarely possesses. Older people tend to dwell less on the negative, recover more smoothly from distress, and place more weight on what truly matters to them, letting smaller troubles pass. One leading explanation points to time itself. As the sense of remaining time grows shorter, people seem to shift their priorities toward emotional meaning, toward deepening the relationships and experiences they value most, rather than chasing the new and the merely impressive. The result is a kind of emotional wisdom that tends to grow rather than fade. It is a hopeful counter to our fears about growing older. The mind does not simply wear down with the years. In the difficult and important work of feeling well and steadily, of holding emotion with grace, it often gets quietly, genuinely better. There are minds that hold side by side profound limitation and astonishing ability, in a combination that science still cannot fully explain. A person who needs help with the simplest tasks of daily life may be able to tell you the day of the week for any date across centuries, instantly, or reproduce a sprawling cityscape in perfect detail after a single glance, or play back a complex piece of music having heard it only once. This is savant ability, found in a small number of people, some with developmental conditions, a few who developed it suddenly after injury to the brain. Within a mind otherwise deeply constrained, an island of skill rises extraordinary by any measure, in memory, in calculation, in art or music. Researchers have ideas about how it might arise, perhaps a different balance of brain function that grants unusual access to detail. The rest of us filter out, but no full account exists. These cases sit at the edge of what we understand about the mind, and they carry a quiet message. The brain holds capacities we rarely glimpse, possibilities folded away beneath the ordinary, surfacing in these rare minds in ways that remind us how little we truly know about what a brain can do. Here is one of the most haunting and tender things that medicine has observed and cannot explain. Among people whose minds have been deeply lost to dementia for years, who no longer recognize their own families or speak coherently, some return briefly in the time near death. The fog lifts. They become lucid, clear themselves again, recognizing loved ones, speaking with understanding, sometimes saying goodbye in the very last hours or days of life. This is called terminal lucidity, and accounts of it reach back a long way, gathered now with more care by researchers trying to understand it. In a brain ravaged by disease, where the machinery of memory and self seemed irreparably damaged, the person somehow surfaces one final time, clear and present. No one knows how this is possible, how a mind so far gone can return so completely, however briefly, at the end. It defies what we believe about the damage dementia does. For the families who witness it, it can be a final precious gift, an unexpected goodbye from someone they had already in so many ways lost. And for science, it remains a genuine and humbling mystery, a light returning just once more before the end. People who have come very close to death and returned, whose hearts had stopped before they were revived, sometimes describe a strikingly similar experience. A sense of peace, of leaving the body, of moving through a passage toward light, of meeting figures or seeing scenes from their lives. These near-death experiences are reported across many cultures, often with enough common features to suggest something shared in how the brain behaves as it approaches its end. The accounts are vivid, emotionally profound, and frequently life-altering for those who have them, and they deserve to be taken seriously as real experiences. What produces them remains debated and uncertain. Some researchers point to what may happen in a brain starved of oxygen and flooded with activity as it nears shutdown, surprising findings of surges of organized brain activity in the dying that might underlie such experiences. The science is genuinely unsettled, and honest researchers hold their conclusions loosely. What seems clear is that the brain, even as it fails, may be capable of generating experiences of remarkable depth and coherence. Whatever their ultimate source, these moments at the edge of life are real to those who live them, and they remain one of the most profound frontiers of what we understand about the mind. Among the things people report from the edge of death, one recurs often and strikes deep. A sense that their life or great stretches of it return to them all at once, memories unfolding in a way that seem to step outside ordinary time. People speak of a life review scenes from across their years, arriving not in sequence, but together, vivid and complete, sometimes felt from the perspective of others they had affected. Time itself seems to lose its usual shape in these accounts, the orderly march of past and present giving way to something more like simultaneity. We have already seen how flexibly the brain handles time, how it stretches and compresses, and rewrites our sense of duration in ordinary life. Perhaps, at the very end, as the brain's normal functioning unravels, that flexibility opens fully, and the structure of remembered time loosens altogether. The science here is at its most tentative, and we should be honest that we are near the limits of what can be studied. But the reports are consistent enough to be worth holding. At the threshold of death, the mind's long, quiet work of ordering experience into time may finally give way, letting a life be felt for a moment, all at once. When memory fails, when names and faces and recent moments slip away, one thing often remains, reaching the person when little else can: music. People deep in dementia, who no longer recognize their own children, or recall what happened an hour ago, can light up at a song from their youth, singing every word moved, visibly present again in a way that words alone cannot summon. Familiar music from earlier life appears to be held in a way that resists even advanced disease, able to reach across the damage and stir memory, emotion, and recognition. There is something about how music binds to memory, woven together with feeling and with the times of our lives, that lets it endure when so much else is lost, and lets it serve as a door back to the person inside. Caregivers and researchers have found that a beloved song can calm distress, awaken responsiveness, and return a flicker of self to someone who seemed beyond reach. It is among the most moving things we know about the mind that when nearly everything else has gone quiet, a melody learned long ago can still find its way in, and for a few minutes bring someone back to themselves. In the rooms where people sit with the dying, a quiet piece of guidance is often passed along, that even when someone can no longer respond, they may still hear. Speak gently, the advice goes. Say what you need to say, because hearing may be among the last of the senses to remain. There is some evidence to support this found in research recording the brains of dying people, where responses to sound appeared to continue even in the final unresponsive hours, even as other functions ebbed away. It seems that the capacity to register sound may linger after the ability to show any response is gone, so that a familiar voice, a few loving words, might still reach someone who can no longer answer. We should hold this as likelihood rather than certainty, since studying experience at the very end of life is profoundly difficult and our knowledge is limited. But the gentleness it invites is its own kind of wisdom, whatever the science finally confirms. It costs nothing to speak softly to someone leaving, to offer words of comfort and farewell on the chance, perhaps the likelihood that somewhere in a fading mind, they are still heard. Of all the mind's mysteries, this one asks of us only tenderness. We have seen that an individual memory can be false planted or reshaped without the person knowing. Stranger still is when many people unconnected to one another share the exact same false memory of something that never happened. Large numbers of strangers will confidently recall a public event a certain way, a logo, a line, an outcome, a moment, agreeing in vivid detail on something that, checked against the record, simply did not occur as they remember. This collective false memory has become widely discussed, and it reveals that the forces shaping memory are not purely personal. We reconstruct the past using shared expectations, common assumptions about how things probably went, and the same logical gaps lead many minds to fill them the same wrong way. When a memory feels intuitive, when it fits the pattern, we expect it can spread and feel confirmed by others who recall it identically, each taking the agreement as proof. It is a striking demonstration that memory is in part a shared and social construction, prone to the same errors across many minds at once. The past we collectively remember is no more a perfect record than the past any one of us holds, and sometimes whole crowds are certain together of something that never was. Think of who you were 10 years ago, the things you wanted, believed, and loved, the person you were certain you would always be. Now notice how much has quietly changed. Across a single life, the mind reshapes itself again and again, our values, tastes, opinions, and very personality shifting more than we ever expect them to. Researchers studying people across the years have found something telling. When asked, people readily acknowledge how much they have changed in the past, yet they consistently believe they have now at last become their final self and will change little going forward. This holds at every age, the young and the old alike, convinced that who they are today is who they will essentially remain, and they are reliably wrong. Change does not stop. The person you will be in another decade will differ from the one reading this in ways you cannot now foresee, just as today's self would have surprised the person you were. There is something freeing in this, and something humbling. The certainties you hold so firmly now, the tastes that feel so fundamentally yours. are very likely a passing chapter. The mind is never finished becoming. It rebuilds you quietly across the whole length of a life. We have just touched how much the mind changes across a life. Sit with what that truly means, carried to its conclusion. In measurable ways, you are no longer the same person you were a decade ago, and the person you are right now will not return. The cells of the brain alter its connections, continually remade by experience. The memories you carry have been rebuilt and revised, many of them now subtly different from the events they record. The values and preferences and certainties that feel so central to you have shifted and will shift again. The continuous self we feel ourselves to be, that single unbroken thread, is real as an experience, but rests on a substance in constant change, a river that keeps its shape while every drop within it moves. This is not cause for unease, but for a kind of quiet attention. The version of you living this exact moment with these particular thoughts and feelings and certainties is in a real sense unrepeatable here once, and then gradually replaced by the next. To know this is to hold the present a little more closely, aware that the one experiencing it now is passing gently and continuously into someone new. You would think that if anyone could predict how you will feel, it would be you. Yet we are surprisingly poor at it, consistently mistaken about how future events will affect our own happiness. Researchers have studied this carefully, and the pattern is robust. We tend to overestimate how good the good things will make us feel, and how long that feeling will last, and equally overestimate how devastating and lasting the bad things will be. The promotion, the prize, the longed for change brings less lasting joy than we imagined, while the dreaded loss or setback, once it arrives, is more bearable than we feared, our minds adapting and recovering more fully than we ever predicted. This is called affective forecasting, and our errors in it are remarkably consistent. We underestimate our own resilience, the quiet capacity to absorb hardship and return toward our baseline, and we overestimate how much any single outcome will reshape our happiness for good. There is real comfort folded into this finding. The thing you most fear will likely not break you as you imagine, and the thing you most chase will likely not complete you as you hope. We are, in the end, more durable and more steady than our own anxious forecasts suggest. Stand beneath a sky thick with stars, or before a mountain, or anything vast enough to exceed your usual frame, and notice what happens inside. The constant background hum of yourself, the worries, the plans, the running self-concern briefly goes quiet and something opens. This is awe, and researchers have begun to study what it does to us. The experience of something genuinely vast, something that doesn't fit our ordinary sense of scale, tends to shrink the felt importance of the self. A quieting, often described as feeling small in the best possible way. In that loosening of self-focus, people become measurably more generous, more connected to others, more patient, more willing to help, as though the boundaries of the self had grown briefly more porous. Awe seems to pull us out of our own narrow concerns and set us for a moment within something larger. It can come from nature, from music, from a great work, from witnessing real goodness, from anything that overflows our usual measure. There is wisdom in seeking it out. The mind, so often caught in the tight loop of itself, is eased and widened by encounters with the vast, reminded of its place in something far greater, and made in that reminder quietly kinder. Across this long gathering of facts, we have met minds that differ profoundly. Those with no inner voice, those who picture nothing, those who remember every day, or cannot form new memories, those whose senses cross, those who hold islands of radagam. Impossible skill. The variety is real and deep, and yet beneath all of it lies a shared foundation, the same few astonishing capacities present in every human mind. The ability to remember and to imagine, to model the minds of others, to use language to feel, to be aware, to turn experience into a continuous self. These are not the property of some minds, but the common inheritance of nearly all the shared architecture beneath every difference of culture, language, ability, and experience. The person across the world, raised in another tongue and another way of life, runs on the same fundamental capacities you do, builds a self, the same way dreams and remembers and feels, by the same deep design. There is something quietly unifying in this. For all the genuine variety in how minds work, and it is vast, we are at the foundation kin. Every one of us carrying the same remarkable equipment, the same handful of capacities that together make a human mind. Consider how much of your mind you never actually meet. The thoughts you are aware of, the feelings you can name, the decisions you watch yourself make. These are the visible surface. Beneath them, the greater part of the mind's work goes on in silence, entirely outside awareness. Your brain regulates the body, passes language before you grasp the meaning, recognizes a face in an instant, weighs options, forms judgments, prepares actions, all below the level of consciousness, surfacing only the finished result. We have seen it again and again through these facts, choices that begin before we know we have chosen, reasons assembled after the act, perceptions built from guesses we never witness, memories filled in unseen. Awareness, which feels like the whole of the mind, is closer to a small lit room in a vast dark house where most of the living is done in chambers we never enter. This is not a flaw but the design, since a mind that had to consciously attend to everything could attend to nothing. Still, it is humbling to hold. The you that you know, the conscious, deliberating self, is only the visible portion of something far larger, most of which works ceaselessly, capably, and entirely unheard beneath the surface of all you ever notice. We have come a long way through these 100 facts, and it would be easy to feel that science has the mind well in hand. The honest truth is otherwise and worth stating plainly. After all, our scanners and studies, all our careful experiments and hard-won discoveries, most of what the mind truly is, remains genuinely unknown. We cannot yet say why physical activity in the brain gives rise to inner experience at all. We do not fully understand consciousness or memory's deepest workings, or what dreams are for, or how the felt sense of a self arises from matter. We have mapped a great deal and explained much, and the progress is real and remarkable. But the central mysteries, the ones that touch what it actually is to be a mind, stand largely unsolved and serious. Researchers are the first to admit it. There is no shame in this, and something almost beautiful. The mind remains the great frontier's stranger, and deeper than our instruments can yet reach, holding its core secrets still. We have learned enough to see clearly how much we do not understand, and that clear sight of the vastness of what remains is itself a kind of knowledge and an invitation to keep looking. And so we arrive at the strangest fact of all, the one that has quietly underwritten every other. Through all these 100 glimpses, something remarkable has been happening so close that it is easy to miss. A mind has been studying itself. Everything. We have explored the illusions and the memories, the dreams, the biases, the vast unconscious depths. All of it is the work of a brain, an arrangement of matter that has somehow turned to look back upon its own nature and ask what it is. Consider what that means. The same organ that produces your every thought has produced the thought of itself, become curious about its own workings, built instruments to peer inside itself, and felt wonder at what it found. Across all the known universe, as far as we can tell, here is matter that has woken up and begun to understand itself and to feel the mystery of its own being. You have spent this time using your mind to contemplate the mind, which is perhaps the deepest strangeness there is. The questions we cannot yet answer are themselves being asked by the very thing they are about. A small, astonishing loop matter wondering at itself, looking quietly into the mirror and beginning slowly to know what looks back. Thank you for spending this time here with me. Until next time, good night.